Support for this podcast is brought to you by our patrons over at patreon.com/Jeffrey Wedig.
Very excited to be back here at Phantom Power. This is the second time we've been here. They're always awesome, really cool place. Make sure you're kind to everyone and we'll have a great night. And let's sing some songs.
Feel free to join along if you can figure out the lyrics.
Sing along, have fun.
Have some fun.
I heard the old man say, John Kanaka-Naka-Too-Rye. Today is a holiday. John Kanaka-Naka-Too-Rye. Too-Rye, ho! Too-Rye. John Kanaka-Naka-Too-Rye. Too-Rye, all the way and earn your pay. John Kanaka-Naka-Too-Rye, Too-Rye, ho! Too-Rye, John Kanaka-Naka-Too-Rye. Frisco girls ain't got no clothes. John Kanaka-Naka-Too-Rye. They comb their hair with the hairy backbone. John Kanaka-Naka-Too-Rye, Too-Rye, ho! Too-Rye, John Kanaka-Naka-Too-Rye. We're bound away to Frisco Bay. John Kanaka-Naka-Too-Rye. We're bound away at the break of day. John Kanaka-Naka-Too-Rye, Too-Rye, ho! John Kanaka-Naka-Too-Rye, Too-Rye, ho! Too-Rye, John Kanaka-Naka-Too-Rye. Woo!
Alright. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We're the Susquehanna Shantymen. Welcome. Another beautiful shanty night here at Phantom Power. Thanks to my Druthers coming all the way down here to sing and play for us tonight.
Hi, this is Dr. Jamie Goodall, author of Pirates of the Chesapeake Bay, and you're listening to the Shooting the Breeze Sailing Podcast from theescapepods.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of the Shooting the Breeze Sailing Podcast. This is your captain speaking, Jeffrey Wedig. And thanks to the Escape Pods for hosting us. And this is going to be episode 202. And it is March of 2026. Unfortunately, spring has not sprung quite yet. We had a week at the beginning of March, which was just a big downer. It was cloudy and foggy and rainy and cool and just uninspiring. Finally that broke right around the time change, and we got like 2 or 3 days of decent weather to the point where I could actually get outside and like start working in the yard kind of thing. But then by the weekend it was back down to being cold and rainy. And I did go down to the boat. I spent the night. I didn't do a whole lot. I fixed the tarps because we still had some bad weather coming through. And I did get to hang out though with Jim and Jesse and Jim and Donna and Frank and Brian and a couple other people at the bar with a big fire going on a Friday night. So that was kind of cool. Looking forward to doing more of that in the future, but I'm waiting for this weather to break before I go down there and actually start working on projects and such. I've been watching the YouTubes, and the main one I've been focusing on right now is Red Seas, because Bryony's down for the count with some health issues, but Leon is working on projects, and the one he just started is spongy decks on the coach top roof, and he was cutting out from the underside to get to the rot and dig it all out. And I'm definitely paying attention because that's what I got to do eventually. I'm probably not going to do it this year, probably next year, around my kind of deck underneath my bowsprit on the starboard side. And I don't know, it was interesting because he's cutting from underneath because he didn't want to damage the diamond skid, anti-skid gel coat on the top. And that's interesting because I didn't even really consider getting at it from underneath. I was just assuming I would cut it out on the top. But all that remains to be seen. But I have been watching that, and our friends Bo and Brandy, as they're kind of hanging around Belize, and Mads at Sail Life, because he's Mads, and he's doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And also Andy Miller from Boatworks Today, who is putting together the flooring in his stripped-out Pace Ship 24 from 1970. That I've been following along. And so I've been watching all that, and I've been trolling other sailors and stuff on Facebook. And through that, I came across some interesting content surrounding sea shanties. So, in the Baltimore area, on March 23rd, which is Monday upcoming, if I get this episode out in a timely fashion, and you're listening to this, and it's before the 23rd, you can think to yourself, wow, what am I going to be doing Monday evening on the 23rd around 6 p.m. That I can get into? And one of the answers to that is you're going to go see a Profs and Pints Baltimore event at SOS Pickleball, which is at 409 South Spring Street in Baltimore. And it is an event called The Tale of Sea Chanties. And it is the perfect talk for a port city with Dr. Jessica M. Floyd, scholar of sea shanties during the great age of sail. And that is at 6 p.m. And I'm going to try and be there. But I saw that, and I'm like, that's interesting, because 5 minutes ago I saw another Facebook post from my buddy Greg over at Phantom Power in Millersville, PA, that he's hosting a sea shanty night. And I'm like, wow, maybe I can marry these two things together into one. And so last Thursday, I went to Phantom Power and watched the Susquehanna Shantymen and a band from Connecticut called my Druthers, and witnessed a bunch of, let's say, nautical work and drinking songs. Because if you really want to get technical about it, and I talked to Dr. Jessica Floyd on Wednesday night before I went, and you'll hear that interview here in a minute. But a sea shanty is a very specific song. Does not have anything to do with rum, most cases. It is definitely about work. They're not necessarily fun or meant to be funny, but yeah, and according to Hoyle, like, specific sea shanty comes from basically the late 1600s to the late, not 1800s, but closer to the end of the 1800s. It is a song sung by merchant sailors, not Navy sailors. And it is songs meant to keep time and inspire motivation while doing very specific tasks on a sailing tall ship, plying the waters mostly of the Atlantic, mostly in the English language. And it was just very interesting to talk to Dr. Floyd, because she came at it from a way that you would not even probably consider. She was doing her doctorate she was studying literature and human sexuality and human behavior, and needed kind of a project to work on her doctorate. And she was kind of casting around ideas. She had studied literature and poetry, and was kind of, I don't want to say she was bored by it, but she had been through it. And so as she's like contemplating, well, what am I going to do? She was at home, I guess, talking to her dad across the kitchen table, and for some reason he sprang into song by singing a sea shanty. And she's like, well, wait, what's that? And I guess that piqued her interest, so she began looking into it. And she found, it's kind of difficult because not a lot of people have actually studied honest to goodness sea shanties. There's not that many good examples. Like, there's no recordings of the original ones. I mean, all the people that did do the scholarly work in the mid 20th century, had to dig deep to find examples of these songs. They weren't recorded necessarily. They weren't written down in a lot of cases. I mean, obviously some evidence has to exist for them to exist, but in, I guess, our layman's minds, we've been kind of conditioned by popular culture as to what a sea shanty is, and that is where you end up with the Susquehanna Shantymen and my Druthers on a Thursday night, because they're singing about rum and girls and having fun and that sort of thing. Basically because, somebody wrote a song for a Pirates of the Caribbean movie, or, a pirate or a castaway movie in the 50s or 60s, or some, we have this vision of these haggard sailors, like uneducated, superstitious, all these things, when in reality, to my surprise in talking to her, like, a lot of sailors were family men who were very well educated, very well read. So anyway, it's just kind of interesting, the dichotomy, and then coming at it from a sexuality standpoint, where like maybe you would read the lyrics to a sea shanty and not really consider there is a sexual nature to it.
Help me, Bob, I'm bully in the alley.
Way, hey, bully in the alley.
Help me, Bob, I'm bully in the alley.
Bully down in Shinbone now.
Oh, Sally is my girl in Shinbone Alley.
Way, hey, bully in the alley.
Sally is the girl that I spiced nearly.
Bully down in Shinbone now.
I waltzed up to old Phantom Power.
Way, hey, bully in the alley.
I barged the door like the man of the hour.
Bully down in Shinbone now.
So
Help me, Bob, I'm bully in the alley. Way, hey, bully in the alley. Help me, Bob, I'm bully in the alley. Bully down in Shinbone now.
I bought her rum and I bought her Gino.
Way, hey, bully in the alley.
I bought her wine in white and red, oh.
Bully down in Shinbone now.
And when I spent up all night in a
Way, hey, bully in the alley.
off to bed myself this dinner.
Bully down in Shinbone now. So help me, Bob, I'm bully in the alley. Way, hey, bully in the alley. Help me, Bob, I'm bully in the alley. Bully down in Shinbone now.
We romped around till the Rio.
Way, hey, bully in the alley.
Dawn to break the cocktail crew.
Bully down in Shinbone now.
So I left my Sal to Buccaneer.
Way, hey, bully in the alley.
Golden Joe's for sound idea.
Bully down
and she's written papers on this, written articles for websites. She has a book out already. She's putting out a second book here in May. So very interesting person, and she teaches at the college my wife has a bookstore at, runs a bookstore at right now, in the Baltimore area. So she's local, and I've got to check this event out, and I want to do a podcast about it. So even though we're kind of in the weeds as to what a sea shanty is and what a sea shanty really isn't, in an academic sense, I don't want to be drugged down by that, and nor do I want to give away her entire event spiel that she's prepared and done many times over the past couple years. So, for the rest of us, the Thursday night sea shanty at Phantom Power is a fun way to pass the time. And when you're all sitting around the fire and you want to sing about sailing and drinking and stuff like that, we will just call them sea shanties, for lack of a better term, because I had a really good time listening to all that. And I'm going to check the show notes. I'll try and put down the names of the songs, because some of these shanties that they were singing on Thursday night at Phantom Power are original songs, and some of them are not. And I don't even know if I know the title to half of them. I'll have to dig through some websites and things to see. But I will try and I have at least 2 songs recorded that I know I'm putting in, and then maybe I'll put in a snippet of a good honest to goodness sea shanty if I can find one. And anyway, it's a good way to while away the time, thinking about songs of the sea. How's that? And then also, we went to see our friends, the Ogham Stones, who do the music for the podcast, Sunday at Phantom Power, and they do Celtic music, which a lot of is got to do with pirates or sailing voyages, but is not necessarily a sea shanty either. So there you have it. But they're fun, and I'll put one of those in there.
We're shipping out for the mainland. Got a passion
Anyway, I think it was great fun. I hope you enjoy this episode. I don't have anything scheduled for April yet. I'm trying to work through some things. I caught up with Nate and Vivian from Ocean Passages, and they've had a lot happening in their lives, from family members passing away to new life beginning. And so they're biz. So maybe we'll catch up with them this summer after things calm down a little bit. And anyway, if you got any suggestions for who I should interview, like I said, I've reached out to a couple people and haven't heard back yet, so we'll see what we can come up with. But hopefully by then it is nice and it's warm, and we're, if not out sailing, we're prepping to get out sailing. So thanks to everybody for liking and sharing, and if you're a Patreon member or whatever, hit me up, theescapepods.com. You can find our socials there, and you can send me a message at theescapepods@gmail.com. I'm hoping to catch up with our friend Gene Martell from the Hunterdon Sailing Center up in New Jersey. They're starting their season, but he's coming camping beginning of April in Elk Neck. So I got to try and plan to be at the boat that Saturday evening, because we got a big event in Gettysburg that Saturday morning before Easter, and then we got family events on Sunday. So I'm hoping to catch up with him Saturday night at Hans's Point with a big old bonfire. That would be a best case scenario. But if you're in the New Jersey area, North Jersey, check out the Hunterdon Sailing Club. He's been enamored with it now for 2 or 3 years, and we did a podcast about it last year with Bella from Sailing and Cruising in the East. So check that out. That's about it from here. Spring, hopefully springing soon, and we will catch you on the flip side. Peace.
Well, I recall, pal of mine, when I was 45, a bedraggled creature lucky just to count myself alive. Solid and disheveled and my pockets torn asunder, I sank beneath the street lamps for the wall of chilling chunder. Here's to long goodbyes, boys, and here's to one another. Dearer to the heart and never nearer to the gutter. So grab your ass and oyster glass, and how the hell you been? To the wild winds of misfortune blow us back to town again. Hey!
All right, I'm here with Dr. Jessica Floyd.
Yes.
All right, so yeah, you're a doctor of what exactly?
So I'm a PhD. I have a Doctor of Philosophy.
Okay.
It's an interdisciplinary degree.
Mhm.
And I went to University of Maryland, Baltimore County, where I studied a couple of different lenses of inquiry in order to look at sailing shanties. But my primary research work leading up to my PhD was actually in gender and sexuality.
Mhm.
I've studied erotic cultural artifacts since I was about 16 years old.
Okay. Well, you probably weren't supposed to be, but
Well, actually, it's a long-standing joke in my family that I always researched kind of weird, out-of-the-way, interesting things. And
right.
I do tell this joke often, but it won't give it away.
Yeah.
I started reading The 120 Days of Sodom by the Marquis de Sade when I was 16 years old.
Right.
Because I was absolutely in love with this black metal band called Cradle of Filth, and they sang this song about, the 120 Days of Sodom. And so I bought the book. Why not buy it, read it?
Yeah.
And so my dad saw it on the kitchen table, and he asked me, quite frankly, do we need to talk about this? I was like, I don't know. Super curious.
Yeah.
And so from there, I started researching erotic worlds. I mean, I'm primarily a literature scholar.
Mhm.
I'm trained in literary close reading. I'm a humanities person. And so my interests all the way up through my doctoral program were all about finding erotic cultural artifacts that I found fascinating. And what I do is I unpack those artifacts for what they might tell us about gender and sexuality. And so while my PhD itself is interdisciplinary,
Right.
If I had to sort of, put a title on exactly who I am and what I do,
Right.
I'm an erotic scholar. I'm a researcher of erotic cultural artifacts.
Right, and that's kind of, there's always the subtext of that, and I think you even say it, that it's always there. We just don't ever talk about it.
100%.
Really, you know what I mean? It's half of the art, is just about all of that stuff, and we just don't ever bring it to the fore, I guess. So ostensibly, I saw that you're doing a talk in 2 weeks or next week or whatever. I think it's on the 23rd.
23rd, yeah.
23rd. And it's all about sea shanties. So I'm like, the Profs and Pints in Baltimore. And I got interested, and I'm like, that. And then my buddy owns a club here in Millersville, PA, that has a shanty night tomorrow night. The Susquehanna Shantymen and another band. I can't remember the name of them. So anyway, it was kind of like, and then I just saw something to, Facebook's listening to it. So now shanty stuff pops up.
Of course.
So I was like, well, I should talk to you about what exactly a sea shanty is. And then I kind of read up a little bit, and I'm like, well, she's coming at this from a very specific and not odd, but, not everyday approach to sea shanties.
Yeah.
So like I said, you're giving this talk next week, and I don't want to necessarily give the whole thing away because we want people to actually show up and engage with it. But tell me what your definition of a sea shanty is, because it's quite specific, and I don't think in pop culture right now it's kind of broad, and it kind of includes a bunch of other things.
Big time. Yeah, and so I really appreciate this question and the opportunity to chat with you today about it, for sure.
Yeah.
When I first dove into shanties, pun intended, I was definitely steeped in the same cultural expectations of what they were going to be.
Right.
Because I'm a scholar of erotic cultural artifacts, I immediately wanted to find, the sexy stuff, the funny stuff, the yo ho ho and a bottle of rum stuff, you know?
Tell me we will pay Paddy Doyle for his boots. Tell me we will all drink whiskey and gin. Tell me we'll all shave under our chin. Tell me we'll all throw muck at the cook. Tell me we'll pay Paddy Doyle for his boots. That's it.
And so when I started researching shanties, what I found was that really is a cultural misconception around them.
Right.
And so if I were to give you my definition of shanties, it would be very distinct and very specific. I tend to tie my definition to what a lot of ethnomusicologists identify shanties as, which are sailing work songs of the sea.
Heave away, haul away. South Australia, round Cape Horn. We're bound for South Australia. All the way, you rolling king. Heave away, haul away. All the way, you hear me sing. We're bound for South Australia. As I walked out one morning fair. Heave away, haul away. It was there I met Miss Nancy Blair. We're bound for South Australia. All the way, you rolling king. Heave away, haul away. All the way you'll hear me sing, we're bound for South Australia. There's just one thing that grieves
haul up around Cape Horn.
Heave away, haul away.
You wish to God you never was born.
We're bound for South Australia. All the way, you rolling king. Heave away, haul away. Haul away, you'll hear me sing. We're bound for South Australia.
And I land in Australia sand.
Heave away, haul away.
With a bottle of whiskey in me hand.
We're bound for South Australia. Haul away, you rolling king. Heave away, haul away. Haul away, you'll hear me sing. We're bound for South Australia. Haul away, you rolling king. Heave away, haul away. Haul away, you'll hear me sing. We're bound for South Australia.
My definition is probably one of the more stringent ones.
Right.
And I fall more in line with ethnomusicologists, at least in that respect, where, at this point, shanties have become sort of a catch-all term for any song that's about the sea or sailing life or sailors in general.
Right.
Whereas shanties were a very specific tool of the sailing ship.
Right.
That sailors wouldn't necessarily, they wouldn't say, like, I'm about to sing a shanty or here's a shanty boys,
Right.
things like that. They would actually just start singing it.
Right.
And the song itself was specifically tied to a particular job on the ship. So whether it was hauling or heaving, pulling at lines, a particular song was applied to the particular task at hand.
Yeah, so it's very specific sea shanty. So, like I said, when I say sea shanty, I mean like Dropkick Murphy songs and
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
all of that sort of thing. So how did you, I guess, go from your investigations into sexuality and gender and all that? Like, how did you land on sea shanties in particular?
Yeah. So as an undergraduate and graduate, I studied 17th and 18th century British pornography.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked specifically at written poetic pornography.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was getting ready to find a master's thesis project,
Right.
I was kind of done with looking at poetry.
Yeah.
And I was looking for something fun. And my dad, one night, after several glasses of wine,
Right.
started singing Barnacle Bill the Sailor. And I was absolutely enthralled with it.
Uh-huh.
And I immediately looked it up the next day, and I started to follow this track of bawdy song.
Right.
I wanted to understand, what these songs were, if there were others like them,
Right.
if, they might be similar to the things that I saw in 17th and 18th century, British poetry and
Mm-hmm.
pornography.
Right.
And so it started this research path of attempting to locate these erotic sailor songs, because the erotic sailor songs felt so much like, erotic poetry. And
Right.
Unfortunately, what I found is that our cultural conception of shanties, like, there really aren't that many erotic shanties in existence.
Right.
Even though they most likely were sung on sailing ship, because working class men,
Right.
much like military cadences and,
Right.
rugby songs, like, folks like to sing dirty tunes.
Right. Yeah.
But it was very difficult to find. Yeah, but it was very difficult to find the actual, like, erotic song. But I guess to answer your question, what originally interested me was that, this Barnacle Bill the Sailor song felt like it was so much like the erotic poetry that I had researched to date. And I was fascinated by it because there were multiple dimensions to it.
Right.
When I'm looking at something like erotic poetry, like, there's one main writer who wrote it. He's from a particular period. It was shared among a particular group of men. And so, it's interesting as an artifact, like, situated in history.
Mm-hmm.
The shanty was incredibly confounding and fascinating because there were multiple things that came into play when I was looking at them. Like, when were they sung? Where are they held? What's in the songs? How do I find a stable text? How is it that men sing about sex and gender when they're away at sea for sometimes, years at a time? And so they were, what really got me interested in them was the dimensionality to them, the multiple things that came together to make them a living, breathing cultural entity.
Right, and one that I would imagine is hard to document in a lot of cases.
Very. It is very hard to document. And so one of the things that I talk about, and one of the things that my research has shown, is that, because it was a working class song tradition, it wasn't something that was necessarily collected. It was something that was passed around orally. It was something that was, it was such an important artifact to the sailing ship and to the men who sang the songs, that they didn't want them necessarily shared with the wider cultural world. And so, we really only have examples of genuine shanties from like the middle 1800s into the later 1800s, early 1900s, although I think that they're much older. It's very difficult to find evidence to really prove that they're much older than when they were first collected around the 1868, I believe, is the very first shanty that made its way into print.
Okay. Well, how old would the poetry be that you were studying?
The poetry that I looked at goes all the way back to about 1600.
Yeah. So, there had to have been,
and so
earlier, just they weren't documented or whatever, you know what I mean?
That's my thinking, and a couple of the pieces that I've written and something that I talk about in my book, Cabin Boys, Milkmaids, and Rough Seas, you probably came across it. But one of the things that I talk about is that there is an interesting connection between the lyrics that you can see in some collected song and some of the early ballad traditions from, the British ballad tradition. So things like the Milkmaid song in particular is one that fascinated me. And there are images of the milkmaid throughout English balladry, especially in the tie between the milkmaid and her sexuality and the fecundity of the land. And we end up seeing the milkmaid make her way into versions of Blow the Man Down, which I think is really interesting. And so I think lyrically you could make an argument that some of the songs are much older, but depending on the particular discipline, the particular framework that you're working from, proving that is going to be very difficult.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Because I wrote down here, you said about football chants and military marches. So the kind of one of the hallmarks, I guess, of a particular shanty, like you said, it's tied to the work that they're doing. So the call and response thing, and I was saying it's the age of sail is like the the golden age of the sea shanty, but I would imagine there has to be a connection earlier to the seagoing vessels, possibly from like the Vikings, where you've got 30 guys rowing and one guy up top, whether he's got a whip or whatever he's doing, but he's making them row in concert. And that was just one thought that I was like, maybe it's kind of starts there and then goes, because you can kind of do the military left, right, left, right, left, right. Yeah. You know what I mean? And then you get into the weirdo Marine calls, you know what I mean? Is there any evidence of that, I guess, or do you think that's a valid point, or am I stretching?
I don't think you're stretching at all. I'm someone who ascribes to the much older period of dating for shanties. And there is some evidence to tie them back as early as the 1400s. There was a piece by Lucy Broadwood and A.H. Fox Strangeways, who traced nascent shanty singing back to about the 1400s. And we see some like similar sort of like wild hitching, chanting, call and response type singing from that broad swath of time from about 1400, even near the end of the Age of Sail, which could be all the way as far as 1890. The problem becomes, how do you substantiate it?
Right.
Right? We've had song attached to work probably since the dawn of time. One of the things that, shanties demonstrate to us is that there's incredible power between body, breath, and movement.
Right.
And in fact, the song, like shanty songs have been said to be worth the weight of 10 men.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, in terms of where your head is, my thinking, like, 100%, there were probably something like shanty songs, across time, space, and place. But when it comes to actually proving that or authenticating it, we have very little evidence.
Okay. Now,
beyond, like, scattered little pieces of ephemera that maybe suggest it.
Right. Is there, I guess, more evidence of land-based, like, work songs?
Yes.
That goes way back further than sea shanties. Because I think the sea shanty, by definition, they're at sea. They're on a boat.
Right.
They're isolated.
Yep.
They're not working when other people are around. They're only working with themselves. And I'm assuming, especially when you get up, the captain probably doesn't really associate with his...
No.
He's the learned guy on the boat, or the off... And the other part to this was, I noticed that this really wasn't a Navy thing. It was a merchant thing.
That's correct.
So you're kind of isolated. So I guess unless those guys are educated and writing this stuff down, you're not going to see any evidence of it, I guess.
Well, and it's not just with the men writing it down. It's actually more about the fact that folks who are in positions where they were interested in writing that material down and collecting it, they weren't necessarily interested in the ephemera from the sea.
Right.
There are a number of Atlantic scholars who talk about the fact that sailors as a bunch across the Great Age of Sail were actually usually pretty educated.
Oh, really? Okay.
They often had, libraries that traveled with them on their sailing ships. Christian societies often sent them along with Bibles.
Right.
I believe that they were called the Seaman's Friend, the Seaman's Friends.
Yeah.
But sailors, traveled with books. They kept log books. They kept diaries. We have incredible cultural artifacts of sailors' time at sea. And so it's interesting that because there was so much reading and writing and reflecting, that shanties really didn't become a part of, their log books or their reflections. And the only answer I can make to that is conjecture. And the conjecture is that because the shanty was a tool of the ship, much like, tar and and lines, that, it wasn't necessarily something that they felt was worthy of committing to, to a logbook or a journal.
Right.
And, when it comes to, other oral traditional material, we don't really have, things like the Folklore Society caring much about any of those materials until at least the 1890s.
Right.
Right. And so, by that time, a lot of that cultural ephemera, a lot of that, a lot of shanty singing had really, I don't want to say it ever died out because it never really did, but we have the intrusion of the Industrial Revolution. And so sailors weren't necessarily traveling in the same ways that they had been or working the ship in the same way that they had been. And so, my thinking has always been that the shanty sort of, I think an argument could be made that the shanty started to become a little bit more diffuse then, right? Like it wasn't necessarily just the purview of the sailor. It wasn't something that he needed to use anymore.
Right. Well, and I was wondering, because maybe they could see, especially by the late 1800s, change coming. And so somebody's probably like, this may not exist in 10 or 15 years. Maybe we ought to, capture it somehow.
100%. And
Yeah.
that was, one of the motivations of the Folklore Society.
Uh-huh.
An interest in the sailing world really didn't happen until later parts of the 1800s as sail gave way to steam.
Yeah.
Sailing was so much a part of everyday life that, folks didn't really think about it as being something that they would necessarily want to, collect cultural artifacts from. I mean, it would almost be the same way as us saying, like, let's collect materials from HVAC culture.
Yeah. Right.
Like, I'm sure that, like, folks who, work in HVAC or plumbing or whatever, like, there are probably cultural mores.
Yeah.
Or jokes that we tell, right? And so while that would be fascinating for someone like me, we don't write them down.
Yeah. Well, now you could probably find a Facebook group somewhere and troll the...
Probably. Or a sociologist asking for folks to write them down.
Yeah. So, given the kind of limited scope of the OG sea shanty, like, how many songs roughly, like, what kind of numbers are we looking at of documented songs that you could find? I mean, is there hundreds of them? Is there thousands of them? Or?
I mean, it would be really difficult for me to put a number on them to be fair, because the James Madison Carpenter collection, which is probably one of the largest ones I looked at, there are several hundred songs collected there.
Okay.
Like, I think there are at least 4 or 5 files, or copies of songs in the files. Well, there are 4 or 5 files, and then within each file, there's probably about, I don't know, man, maybe like 200 songs. I'm trying to visually remember.
So how do we document the cadence or the rhythm of the song?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So I would say the first step in doing that would have to be recognizing what type of song you have.
Uh-huh.
So if you have something like a capstan song, which is going to be a little bit longer, a little bit more ballad-like in structure, you would have to imagine what it would feel like to walk the capstan of the ship.
Yeah.
And as you're walking and pushing the capstan, that would, inform the type of cadence or the type of sound that you would be applying to that particular task. And if you think about it, it's incredibly slow.
Yeah.
Right? Versus something like, a short drag song or a hauling or heaving song that might be, a couple quick, movements.
Right.
And you also have to think about what's going to happen with your breath, with your action. And so that song is going to have maybe a little bit of a sharper sound, a little bit of a faster sound.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a shorter song, a shorter duration.
Right.
And so, how do you figure out how to sing a shanty? Well, the answer to that question is you have to be on a ship.
Right.
Right? Like, you have to be working.
Yeah.
And so when shanty bands are creating their versions of songs, in bars or at Renaissance festivals or, wherever, it's really, it's probably more in line what you would see with like an Irish ditty or, a drinking song or a rugby song, right? It has that sort of lilting, like, yo ho ho and a bottle of rum. That's all I could think of, right? Whereas an actual shanty, the music itself is going to be so uniquely tied to what you're doing that I think rendering it into song would be very difficult. And there aren't instruments involved, right? Like it's all sound and it's impromptu. You talked a little bit earlier about, just the men being involved with it, and it's true. The shanty was deployed by the Shantymen, who was the man on ship who was prized for his voice and his ability to extemporize. And, the men would fall in line with the refrain as they were working because most of them had a pretty good working knowledge of shanties.
Right.
Or at least you would need to, right? Because that was how you became a part of, a part of the ship. It was a part of their cultural mores. And so, the Shantymen would actually like create songs on the fly.
Right.
You know, so a lot of the songs that we have in our collections are from multiple different shantymen.
Right.
Or multiple different repertoires, because everyone had a different version,
Yeah.
you know, and it changed as the ship sailed, as the voyage went on, as people joined the ship, and so they really are a living, breathing entity.
Right. So can you hear a song and kind of pick what job they were doing when they were singing it?
For the most part, I would say yes, that's true.
Okay.
Although, you know, if you look at contemporary renditions of shanty songs,
Right.
sometimes it's difficult to tell,
Yeah.
you know, what they were, and arguably they're not shanties because they're
right.
they're not doing their thing.
Well,
I hate to beat a dead horse, but
right.
but you know, if you look at a shanty like printed on a page, like what I was doing with archival work,
Yeah.
you can sort of tell what a song is just based on how long it is.
Uh-huh.
And how long the lines themselves are. So if you have something like a capstan song, again, that's going to be much longer in its duration. So it's almost going to look like what you imagine of poems and ballads and songs that we see in the Irish folklore tradition.
Yeah.
But if you look at something like, I guess, let me make it a little more concrete here. So Holloway Joe, are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
So Holloway Joe, you can look at how short and quick those lines are, and you can tell that it's a hauling or a heaving song.
Right.
Versus something like Blow the Man Down, which was, probably fitted for a capstan song.
Right.
Where you could add lines and keep going along, and it was more narrative
Uh-huh.
in its construction.
So.
But the tough thing, and this is the one last thing I'll add about it, is that any song could become whatever they needed.
Right.
So, let's say Holloway Joe was a favorite, and usually we would see it as a hauling or heaving song. They might say, well, let's mess it up a bit and make it a capstan song.
Right. Right.
Well,
I was going to say, because even, I'm sure that the Pirates of the Caribbean is a whole other thing, but I'm just picturing as you're talking about the jobs in the movie, the first one, they're scrubbing the decks out, in, out, in, and they kind of make it connect to the music in the actual movie. And I'm just like, so that would be you got 5 guys doing this, all day long. And they would have 10 different songs that they sang, to that kind of the same beat, I guess. But so when you're researching this, nobody's putting this down because there's no instruments, but nobody's putting it down musically or doing any kind of documenting that way. They document the words, but not necessarily the sound, I guess.
So people did.
Oh, they did? Okay.
There are some examples of shanties with songs or the music attached to them.
Right.
But very often those were a part of pop culture publications that were actually used for performances.
Right.
And the scholar who talks about this the best, his name is it's Gib Schreffler. And he has this fantastic book, Boxing the Compass.
Okay.
Which it is, if not the definitive piece that looks at the history of all of the collections of shanties that we have available to us. And he talks specifically about the fact that, that attempt to render the shanty into music was primarily with the eye towards performance in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And, though he didn't talk about this, my feeling was, when we render the shanty for performance in that way, it consistently moves the song away from its original intended purpose.
Right.
And so it ends up muddying the waters to a degree, another pun, 100% intended.
Right.
That then makes it really difficult, for that actual cultural artifact to be understood in its purest form.
Mm-hmm.
Because really, even the word shanty, the spelling that I prefer is the CH, which comes from or is said to come from a French word, chantes or chanter.
Uh-huh.
I'm probably completely bungling the French,
Right.
so don't shoot me.
Yeah.
But the original, like, that term was actually meant to chant.
Right.
And so the song that we're used to is probably more than anything else really just like a chanted spoken word.
Right.
Not necessarily the melodic singing
Right.
that we've come to be used to.
Okay.
In fact, there's probably an argument to be made that they're very similar to like marching cadences.
Right. Right. Now, are there shanties in different languages?
So I always get asked this question, which is so funny. I primarily researched, the Anglo-American
Yeah.
shanties because those are the biggest repositories that we have.
Right.
I don't want to whitewash the history of shanties at all. And one of the unfortunate pieces of the history is that a lot of shanty songs were probably directly out of the African American work song tradition.
Right.
And the Caribbean work song tradition. And so a lot of the songs were probably African American or Caribbean in their origin.
Right.
But in terms of like different languages, I know that there's a gentleman who researches shanties. I want to say I think he's from Norway.
Okay.
But he claims to find some shanties that are in different languages. But my understanding of the tradition was that it was such an Atlantic song tradition.
Okay.
That was shared in merchant sailing vessels across the Atlantic, that it nearly became sort of a solidifying language across sailing ships and across the seas.
Right.
There are quite possibly shanties in other languages. I'm not aware of them.
Okay.
It would be fascinating to see them. But it's always been my contention that when shanties were sung, sailing ships were often manned with mixed race crews and men from different cultures, different ports, different areas. And the language and the work of the ship ultimately became this like mixing bowl.
Right.
Where the language of the ship was shared among these different men, and the shanty was no doubt shared among the different men. And so I would be surprised if shanties were in a different language on many of these Atlantic sailing ships during the Great Age of Sail, but it's not to say that they don't exist.
Right. Just because you mentioned France, French for shanty, but, when you're talking about plying the seas, I guess prior to the 1800s, when you're talking about Revolutionary War and before, France, Spain, Portugal, there's all these seafaring nations that have these, and a lot of them are military navies, but I'm sure there was tons of merchant ships going all over the place once the New World was found. You know what I mean? So I'm curious if it's just nobody's really looked.
and it's a great question because I think that's ultimately probably the case, right? Like to the point I made earlier about, the whitewashing of the shanty tradition.
Right.
It's probable that those songs did exist, but during the height of shanty collection,
right,
we're talking about a period of time where primarily white male collectors were looking for representations of white male singing.
Right. Yeah.
And so, when they were, grabbing these songs and collecting them and trying to keep them for posterity, they were mainly looking for reflections of themselves. And so, much like other pieces of our history, some of those pieces are lost to time. So I think that there's a contention to be made that, both of these things can be held true.
Right.
That potentially there was a fair amount of English shanties that were circulated because of the Atlantic world, but then there's also quite possibly the fact that there were these songs in other languages that no one felt were important enough to keep.
Yeah. So when we're talking like the OG shanties and you kind of talk about the whole sexual nature of some of them, I would imagine, what are the other topics they're singing about? Is it like weather and superstitions and things like that? Or
They sung about terrible food. Captains being endlessly awful. They sung about poor wages. And curiously enough, they sang a lot about how much they wanted to go home.
Oh, yeah.
How much they missed their wives. They sung about the different places that they were visiting. They sung about, mythic sailing figures and hyper masculine men that they looked up to. They're really fascinating representations of male bonding more than anything else.
Right.
Yeah, you're not lying, bud. Unfortunately, unlike the Shantymen, we also play instruments, which makes it a lot harder to hold a beer,
That's why we don't play them.
I don't blame you. Susquehanna, Shantymen. I don't think you guys, I'm not trying to make out with any of you, but I don't think you guys understand how good you are. I mean it, man. Like, 'cause we play. Sounds like Stuart's got a crush on
I have a crush on, I'll run the train on all 8 of you. No, we play with a lot of these Shantymen, and I talk to these guys, they're like, yeah, we practice sometimes, I don't know, we play sometimes, we don't have shirts or anything. Like, dude, we were in the UK, we did a couple sea shanty festivals, and we were going around playing with all these bands. I was like, dude, y'all are fucking better than them. I really, really like you guys. I'm not gonna keep saying it.
He's not going to keep saying it until we finish our next song, and then he's going to say it again.
He's going to be like, man, remember what I was talking about before? Like, I still feel the same way. I'm serious.
Dance card's full, toots. Sorry.
All right. Have you heard about a big strong man who's in a caravan? And heard about the difference of a fight? Oh Lord, what a hell of a fight. You can take all the heavy what you got. Got a line, they can beat the whole lot. He used to ring the bells in the belfry, and now he's gonna fight. Jack Dixie, he was me, brother. See, what you got? Roll 40 medals on the ship. Big chest! Good 50 medals in the west. He knows no big stick of a man, hell's fire. Don't push your shot! You remember you and me, he's got it hard. Got it hard! Like a lady's leg! Punch, they can take a back ship. Big shit! Text on the going in the Navy. Above the window, still west. Well, he thought he'd take a trip to Italy. He go by sea. Jumped off the harbor in New York. Smiling like a man, let it go. He saw the Lusitania in distress. Put it down! He put the Lusitania on a chest. Big chest! Drank all the water in the sea. And I walked on my way to Italy. That I was a big brother. Sailor West. What you got? Photo of 40 medals on his shirt. Big chest! Kill 50 women in the West. He knows no less. Think of a man, hell's fire. Don't push your shot! Plenty room for you and me. He's got it hard. Got it hard like a amazing! Punch like a take a mouse. Big shit! Six on the Union in the Navy. Below the window. See the best. Take us there, John. Well, he thought he'd take a trip to old Japan. He turned up the whole brass band. He played every instrument they got. Like a loud sure he beat the whole lot. Now the old church bells will ring. Yes, yes! The old church choir will sing. Yes, fire! They all turned out to say farewell to my big brother. So that's that I was a big brother. So that's what you got. Put 40 medals on the church. Big chest! He knows no best. Think of a man, hell's fire. Don't push your shot! I remember you and me. He's got it on. Got it on! Amazing! Punch like a take a battleship. Big shit! Takes all the young in the Navy. Another window. See the best.
And I don't. You were saying about how they were probably more educated than we give them credit for, but they were scruffy, weather beaten, salty dogs. I guess would be my.
Very much. Yeah, I don't think there's anything dirtier or stinkier than an early modern sailing ship. I think we also have this sort of like romantic view of what the sailing life was like, but it was It was filthy.
Yeah. I mean,
it was filthy. The food was awful. Men were often, worked to the bone.
Right.
They really didn't have much time to care for themselves. There were horrific injuries that took place on a sailing ship. I mean, they were brutal places.
Right. Yeah, and I guess you were saying about the sexual aspect and the gender aspect of it. I would imagine, and it's all men, they probably don't have a life with women at any point in their life other than if they're ashore, and if they're a sailor for their entire life, they could be living on that ship for 30 years and, not really be exposed to women other than going ashore.
So that's actually a really fascinating part of the history, too, because I went in with the same thinking.
Okay.
I actually went in with the thinking that I'm going to find a bunch of gay shanties.
Right.
Like a bunch of, guys talking about how they, use other dudes for their sexual pleasures. But the fact of the matter is that, sailors were very often quite tied to home and hearth.
Really? Okay.
Very often sailors were married. The sailing life was a way that they could care for their families. There were often women on sailing ships. The captain was allowed to have his wife with him.
Right.
Sometimes women would be brought on board sailing ship to try and keep morale up.
Right.
Obviously, men would be able to see women when they were in port, and certainly as they went to some of the, Caribbean ports of call, they had the opportunity to meet with women and societies that were completely alien.
Right.
To what they experienced in their, home ports. And so this idea that men were in this floating total institution of the sailing ship, like there is some truth to that, but there's also the reality was that they probably had more contact with women than our romantic ideals would like to admit.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting to me, like, Brandy, you're such a fine girl. That's kind of what you get ingrained in your brain through pop culture and stuff, but a bunch of these, roughnecks on a boat, you just don't think, like in the, like, Matern series for Captain Aubrey, like, he's at home, he's got the family and all of that, but you don't think the squabs have that, you know what I mean? You just assume that they just live on the ship all the time. So yeah, that's interesting that you say that they have that tie to home, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the young men who shipped out to sea, I mean, it probably would have been true that they didn't have a family at home quite yet.
Right.
Men would ship out to sea as young as 12 and 13 years old, and so they were just sort of learning the ropes, as it were. But by the time they started to get closer to being able to have their own ships, or, if the seagoing life was, what their vocation was going to be, they had families at home. There's a great book titled Young Men in the Sea, or Young Men at Sea. I can see the cover. But they talk about how, the sailing life in early America, like that was just what men did because of the proximity to the oceans.
Right.
And so they got married like everyone else. They had families like everyone else. They would ship out, for a year or two and come back, and they would, bring back, wealths and riches to their families, and they were incredibly tied to home, and evidence demonstrates that, in port towns, families, women and their children actually created elaborate, little fetishes around their loved ones who were away at sea. And there's like this gift-giving economy between sailors and their families and sailors where, they kept a pretty intimate connection to each other.
Right. Wow, that's interesting.
But there is, I mean, to your point earlier, there's also evidence that men experimented with each other.
Right.
So that wasn't outside of the realm of possibility. So we have research, especially on naval sailing vessels, but that's only because we had courts-martial cases where sailors
Right.
were brought to court for indecent
Right.
interaction.
Yeah, right. Huh, yeah, that's interesting. And because you were saying about, and I don't want to make necessarily this connection, but it happens. Like you're talking about people that are secured on a ship and they're not allowed to leave. They can't go anywhere. They're in the middle of the ocean. It's almost like a prison setup. Mm-hmm. Okay. And again, I really don't want to make this connection, but was there, in the actual, you said there's a guy who's leading the chant and then everyone else is singing, but is there posturing involved as far as trying to prove your masculinity by being able to sing kind of thing?
It's hard to say because there's no evidence that would say that took place. But I think I would imagine it's possible that there was like a bit of competition and ribbing around who had the best voice. But, it seems to me from what I've been able to find that the Shantyman was like sort of the man that everyone decided on ship was the one who had the best voice and the best, repertoire and the best ability to extemporize. And it almost seems like it was an accidental thing.
Right.
You think about like on the schoolyard, the funny kid, or the guy on the job site who's able to make everybody laugh when things are getting dark.
Right, the class clown.
Nobody actually identifies that person, but you all know him.
Right. So my picture of the Shantyman is like a big burly guy with a big beard.
Well,
and
funny enough, it's altogether possible that the Shantyman was actually an African-American singer.
Singer? Okay.
Yeah, and Gibb Schreffler talks about that in Boxing the Compass.
Okay. Because the other thought I had was, you got 8 guys on this side of the ship doing something, and you got 8 guys on this side of the ship doing something, and it turns into a rap battle.
Yeah, I mean, there is always something going on ship, and so, it's possible that there were multiple songs going on at once, or, maybe there's only singing in one area of the ship. Unfortunately, we only have scant evidence about how the shanties were deployed.
Yeah. Now, the other part to that is you've got the Shantymen and the kind of call and response thing going on. Do you think they really cared about harmonizing?
I mean, probably not.
Okay, because a lot of the modern ones that there's definitely like a start-stop kind of thing to it, and then there's the call and response, but then you get 5 guys in baritone, like doing the whole harmonizing thing, and then they're stomping their feet, and they're, you know what I mean, they've got the percussion instruments and stuff, and then you get into the whole Celtic thing, which is a whole other, but kind of based in the same. Not genre, but they're similar in tone, I think, or at least the modern renditions of them are.
So, Mystic Seaport Museum, I don't know if they still do it. Someone told me they do. They used to do a shanty demonstration.
Okay.
And you can look them up on YouTube. And they have demonstrations of folks actually working the ship and singing the songs, and folks singing the refrains or the choruses of the songs, so you can sort of see how people attempt to recreate the shanty in its original intention.
Right.
If I had to hazard a guess of what this sounded like on sailing ship, ships weren't quiet places.
Right.
They were cacophonous. You had the, things banging and clanging, and the ocean slamming against the ship, and, people shouting across to each other. I would imagine that shanties, too, were not always harmonious.
Right.
Or, that folks were necessarily falling in with the same melody or pattern. It was probably just as cacophonous as the ship. Raucous, even.
So, and I mentioned earlier that this is mostly a merchant fleet setup, and because what I read was it was not allowed to sing on naval ships, at least British ones.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you, like, I wonder why they shied away from it if it made everything easier for the guys to actually do their work. Was there a downside to it, I guess, that they found, and they were like, okay, sorry, can't sing anymore?
Yeah, there's a great, there's this great book. It's called Mr. Bligh's Bad Language, and it talks about the mutiny on the Bounty.
Okay.
And Captain Bligh actually tried to require that his sailing men dance and sing. And it became one of the points of irritation for the sailors. So that was part of why they mutinied, was like Bligh not recognizing that, like, you know, they weren't going to celebrate and dance and sing on command.
Right.
But naval vessels also had a band.
Right.
Right. They had a naval band, and so you know, I think that shanties probably would have been useful on a naval sailing vessel. But from what I was able to find, it was primarily, you know, they leaned on their naval band.
Right.
Or the naval, like there's a memoir of a naval drummer. His name was Philip Van Buskirk, and he was the drummer on a naval sailing vessel in the 1800s. And so he was a part of keeping time and making music on the sailing ship. And, you know, shanties really were, I think, positioned more towards that working class space.
Right.
Where the Navy was more about, you know, representing, you know, the particular nation and war times, and focused on discipline and order and hierarchy. Not to say that the merchant vessel didn't have that, because they did.
Yeah.
But I think that at least in terms of the naval sailing vessel, not only was there this, you know, potential mandate that they couldn't sing the songs, but it was just an entirely different way of being.
Yeah. So, were there any pirates that had specific shanties?
I always get asked this question. In fact, people joked that my research project was the pirate project.
The pirate project, yeah.
Which it wasn't. You know, again, like so if sailors were difficult to research because they really didn't keep records, pirates were worse.
Yeah.
Because, you know, pirates were essentially sailors who mutinied and turned pirate, and so they were, you know, they were a collective of men who were basically villains of all nations.
Right.
So they weren't going to keep records. They were going to pillage and destroy and basically prowl the Atlantic.
Right.
But because they mutinied from sailing vessels and then made their way on pirate ships, it's my assumption that they probably did sing shanties.
Right.
Because they recognized how well those worked on merchant sailing vessels. But, like, are there specific, like, pirate shanties?
Right.
I think that's a misconception.
Okay. So
you know, I think that pirates probably extemporized songs and created songs and used those songs for work, but the collections that we have are primarily from those merchant sailers.
So there's no Blackbeards mentioned in shanty lyrics anywhere.
No, not at all. And in fact, when I look over, you know, when I think about the shanties that I encountered, I don't even think that I know of a shanty that talked about pirates.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Not to my knowledge, you know. I mean, and like I said, there are so many of them that's possible.
Yeah.
But there weren't, to my memory, any mention of pirates.
Uh-huh. So, when you're giving your talk here, is this kind of what you're going to be talking about? Like, is there any not details, but areas that you might go in that we haven't touched on for people that want to go to the actual event?
Yeah, so like the sort of overview of the presentation, just to give you a little teaser, is I talk a little bit about how I got into shanties.
Mm-hmm.
And then I talk about what a literary scholar would do with shanties.
Right.
And then I move on to the part of the presentation that makes everybody mad and sad. And I talk about what shanties are not.
Exactly.
Which is that they're not pirate drinking songs.
Right.
They're not the yo-ho-ho and a bottle of rum. And then I talk about what shanties are.
Right.
I talk about their origin and, what they were used for. And I close the presentation by talking about some of the lingering questions that folks have, like, what are the lyrics? Are lyrics fixed? Or are they malleable?
Right.
Were they dirty or were they clean?
Right.
Where can I find them? Can I trust a printed version in the archive, or do they only live in sailors' minds? And so I talk a little bit about the sticky reality of shanties.
Well, like I said, I think in one of my emails, like, in our mind, shanties are fun drinking songs.
Right.
When in reality, they were hard-working songs.
They were hard-working songs through and through.
Yeah.
And in fact, you would get in trouble if you were drunk on ship. So,
right.
And that was true for a merchant vessel as it was for a naval vessel, even though grog was a part of your rations.
Right, yeah. Grog just enough to wet your whistle, not necessarily get you drunk.
Exactly. Yeah, grog was a mixture of rum and water, so it wasn't like it was, anything too crazy. But, they're not what you see on Shanty Talk, and
right.
They're not what you see in shanty revival bands. They're often the renditions that you see in those places are much too fast.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say. Is there so the people that are doing them now? I mean, they're just kind of is there a pop culture reference that everyone's going to? You know what I mean? Like, they don't have the original song necessarily. They might have the lyrics. Like you were saying, it would be tied to a job, but there's definitely some tropes going on. And I was just wondering where those tropes got started. Because there's definitely the thing with the Pirates of the Caribbean. Somebody wrote a song and kind of made it sound like a shanty. And, people take that as gospel. But are there other ones?
I trace it back to Treasure Island.
Okay.
I totally blame Robert Louis Stevenson 100%.
Okay. It's all his fault.
But it's all his fault. Because that's where Yo-Ho-Ho and a Bottle of Rum came from.
Yeah.
But actually, my second book that's coming out in May, it's called The Sons of Neptune.
Oh, wow.
And it traces the sailor in cultural representations of him from the 18th century to 1960s post-Stonewall America.
Okay.
And essentially what I talk about in the book, I don't talk about shanties a ton, but to your question, I think that we have embedded this idea of the sailor in our cultural space.
Right.
Where he is this hard-drinking, cussing,
right.
rabble-rousing, ne'er-do-well.
Yeah.
And I think when we started to see his shanties filtered into cultural space, we melded together his song with what we imagine of him.
Right.
And we started to generate, this weaving between the two that ultimately generated the shanty as being this like celebratory, hard drinking song.
Right.
Completely forgetting the original roots of not only the sailor himself, but also how the song was used.
It almost seems, because my friend's in a Celtic band, and they do, not necessarily shanties, but they do some Irish drinking songs. And it's almost like the scallywag in the ditch in the bar and the scallywag on the ship are probably the same guy.
Yeah.
And they probably have the same hopes and dreams and whatever.
Yeah, and I think the Pirates of the Caribbean today have definitely lent itself to how we view shanties. I think shanty revival bands from like the 1960s and 70s filtered a particular worldview.
Yeah.
The more folklore ballad revivals than shanties necessarily, although they were a part of it.
Yeah.
And I also think just, the fact that shanties get lumped in with a bunch of other things. A lot of collections of shanties or a lot of examples of shanties are collected as a part of drinking songs, fraternity house songs,
Right.
All those different bawdy songs.
Right.
And so they become, by dint of association,
Yeah.
sung just like those songs.
Right.
There's one, there's Robert Cray's Erotic Muse.
Okay.
That book is a collection of a bunch of songs, shanties included, and all of them with very similar patterns.
Wow. Is that Robert
Yeah.
Cray, the musician, or is that a different guy?
No, he's
Okay.
a folklore collector.
Okay. Well, yeah, I was just curious because
Yeah.
it seems like there's nautical drinking songs, Irish songs, but then the subset of shanty is this real narrow thing. But you can go have fun
Yeah.
at a bar
totally.
and sing a shanty, you know what I mean? Or something that sounds like a shanty, I guess.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the one piece that I would impart to folks is that, they are fun, they're
Yeah.
fascinating, they're really neat cultural artifacts, and I think that we can all enjoy them, and I hope that people do, and knowing the history and singing them allows them to stay alive. But I also think recognizing their roots and their origin, it gives us a sense of appreciation for where they came from, and that it's not, drunken revelry. It's tied to real hardworking
Right.
men who were, just trying to make their way in the world.
Right. And you don't have to be a sailor to enjoy them.
Yeah. Yeah, and technically, as a woman who's never been a sailor, I'm a complete interloper. So.
There you go. Well, we'll have to get you out on the bay sailing at some point. We'll hook you up with Captain Boomies, and she'll get you out on a boat somewhere.
Awesome.
Great. So you have a couple books. You mentioned them. Go ahead and tell us where you can get them and what they are again.
Yeah. So both of my books are with University of Mississippi Press.
Okay.
So if you just look up University of Mississippi Press, you can find the books easily. The first one is titled Cabin Boys, Milkmaids, and Rough Seas.
Okay.
That book looks specifically at the repertoire of Stan Hugel, the self-proclaimed last Shantymen.
Right.
And those songs were given to me by Gershon Legman's widow. Gershon Legman was an erotic folklore scholar and collector.
Okay.
And then and what the book does is I do a literary close analysis of the songs.
Okay.
And then the second book is titled The Sons of Neptune.
Mm-hmm.
And that book looks specifically at the sailor archetype, the erotic archetype. So, why do we think sailors are sexy? Why do we always align sailors with drink and sex and all that good stuff? And it traces it from 18th century caricature to pulp pornography of the 1960s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That was fun.
Yeah, I was going to say, what's the research like on that?
It was a blast.
And then the talk that you're giving, you've done this several times all over the place, I guess. And where is it at again?
So it's at a new place. I would have to look it up here. It's a pickleball place.
Okay.
Let me find it here. It is called SOS Pickleball.
Okay. That's in the greater Baltimore area somewhere.
It is. It's on, it's off of Spring Street, 409 South Spring Street.
Okay. And that is Thursday?
That's
It's
Monday, March 23rd.
23rd. Okay.
Yep.
So I'll try and get this out that way. If you're listening to this and it's before then, you can plan on buying tickets and going. And
awesome.
So yeah, and like you said, you're local. So I mean,
yep.
Do you have you do this every couple months, or how does that work? Do you have other speaking things that you do, or is it just this Profs and Pints setup?
So it's really just been Profs and Pints. Most of my presentations have been for academic audiences.
Okay.
And this is actually the first time that I've done this talk in about 2 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So yeah, it'll be sort of a coming home.
There you go. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you very much for
absolutely
coming on and talking all about the shanties that we all enjoy. And yeah, we'll catch you on the flip side.
All right, sounds great. Thank
You
you.
bet. Thanks.
Terrible place, but it's a place that I do see myself.
It's a prison.
Retiring.
You like bricks? No! No, we went there for the gold.
Yeah, you got lied to, buddy.
Before we start this one, sorry, Terry. So this started over a couple drinks. That's why we started doing this. Go figure.
And it's some of us doing a fish, so we have to listen to music.
One of the bottles we were enjoying was a wine from Australia called Molly Duker. So if you hear us mention Molly Duker, feel free to shout. Maybe
shout back.
Maybe a Duker. Or
Well, have a drink.
So welcome aboard the Royal Molly Duker. Thanks for being here.
Farewell to your bricks and mortar.
Farewell to your dirty line.
Farewell to your gangers and your gangplanks.
And to hell with your overtime.
For the good ship Molly Duke.
Just lying at the Cape or to take old Pat with a shovel on his back to the shores of Botany Bay.
I'm on me way down to the Cape where the ship and anchor lay. Took a bunch of navvies. They asked me to engage.
Get 'em out.
I thought I'd stop in for a drink before I went away. Before the tender ship on an immigrant ship to the shores of Botany Bay.
Farewell to your bricks and mortar. Farewell to your dirty lives. Farewell to your gangers and your gangplanks. And to hell with your overtime. For the good ship Molly Duker is lying at the Cape or to take old Pat with a shovel on his back to the shores of Botany Bay.
Big boss comes in this morning
What'd he tell you?
and says, now Pat, you know,
What is it?
don't get your navvy towel, I'm afraid you'll have to go. Well, since he did insult me, I demanded all me pay, and I told him straight I was gonna immigrate
To the shores of Botany Bay.
Come on now.
Farewell to your bricks and mortar. Farewell to your dirty line. Farewell to your gangers and your gangplanks. And to hell with your overtime. To hell! For the good ship Molly Duker is lying at the Cape or to take old Pat with a shovel on his back to the shores of Botany Bay.
And when I reach Australia, I'll go and dig for gold. There's plenty there for the digging up, or so I have been told.
What's that
Or
like?
else I'll go back to me trade, and 1,000 bricks I'll lay, because I live for an 8-hour shift on the
Shores of Botany Bay.
Come on now.
Farewell to your bricks and mortar. Farewell to your dirty lives. Farewell to your gangers and your gangplanks. And to hell with your overtime. For the good ship Molly Duker is lying at the Cape or to take old Pat with a shovel on his back to the shores of Botany Bay. Farewell to your bricks and mortar. Farewell to your dirty lives. Farewell to your gangers and your gangplanks. And to hell with your overtime. For the good ship Molly Duker is lying at the Cape or to take old Pat with a shovel on his back to the shores of Botany Bay. And it's no late now. No late now, no more. Will I play the
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Shooting the Breeze Sailing Podcast brought to you by theescapepods.com. I really hope you enjoyed the show. And if you did, make sure you leave a review, like and share, and tell all of your sailing friends. If you haven't subscribed yet, you can do so at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or your favorite podcast aggregator. If you would like to support the show, you can become a patron over at www.patreon.com/Jeffrey Wettig. If you pledge $2 a show or more, I'll be sure to send you a great Sail On t-shirt. For show notes, links, photos, social media, and more, head over to our website, www.theescapepods.com. While there, Stop by our links and affiliates page for links to our friends and other great sailing media that we enjoy. You can also purchase sailing vocabulary lessons from Franz from over at the Sailing in the Mediterranean and Beyond podcast. The intro music is a song called Never Tell, done by yours truly, an old friend of mine, Greg Young. He was the drummer in an early 90s hardcore band I managed called The Incoherents. You can find them on iTunes, Amazon, and other music sharing sites. If you would like a copy of that song, you will have to email me. Break music is a song called Wild Winds of Misfortune, written by Leo DeSanto of the Lancaster, PA-based band Vinegar Creek Constituency, and is used by permission. The song is performed by Lancaster, PA-based Celtic rock band and friends of mine, the Ogham Stones. The music for this call to action is a live cover of The Wild Rover as performed by the Ogham Stones at McCleary's Pub in Marietta, Pennsylvania back in 2014. If you have questions or comments, or you have show ideas, make sure to write us at theescapepods@gmail.com. Sail on, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Hi, my name is Molly Winans from Spin Sheet Magazine, and you are listening to Shootin' the Breeze from theescapepods.com.
This is Captain Jeffrey Wettig.
And Jeffrey's better half, Nora Segel-Wettig.
And Chris Smoker.
You're listening to the Shooting the Breeze podcast on theescapepods.com. Sail on, brother.
They're all sounds supposed to be in the parking lot, probably.
You probably know most of them.
As she is, yeah. I thought I heard the old man say, leave her, Johnny, leave her. Tomorrow he will get your pay, and it's time for us to leave her. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. Oh, leave her, Johnny, leave her. Oh, the voyage is done, we go, don't blow, and it's time for us to leave her. The wind was foul and the sea ran high. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. We shifted green and none went by, and it's time for us to leave her. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. Oh, leave her, Johnny, leave her. For the voyage is long and the winds don't blow, and it's time for us to leave her.
Oh, I hate to sail on this rotten tow.
Leave her, Johnny, leave her.
No grog alone, the rotten grub,
and it's time for us to leave her. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. Oh, leave her, Johnny, leave her. For the voyage is long and the winds don't blow, and it's time for us to leave her. Get it, Mark. Well, all we have is multi-bread. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. I'm not sure how we'll go when we're dead, and it's time for us to leave her. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. Oh, leave her, Johnny, leave her. For the voyage is done and the winds don't blow, and it's time for us to leave her. Well, the skip was bad, but the mate was worse. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. They blow you down with a strike and a curse, and it's time for us to leave her. Leave
her, Johnny, leave her. Oh, leave her, Johnny, leave her. For the voyage is long and the winds don't blow, and it's time for us to leave her.
Oh, we'd be better off in a nice clean jail.
Leave her, Johnny, leave her.